Good morning and welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. Today we're learning about Chanukah. Chanukah, which seems to be so oriented about presence and on the most superficial level, it seems to be some sort of a pathetic Jewish response to Xmas. Chanukah is so deep. Chanukah is so beautiful. Chanukah is so profound, it's mind-blowing. We're learning about Chanukah the way that the Rebbe taught it in a beautiful mimer in 1977, December of 1977. It's called Mitzvasa Mishatishka Hachama. The mitzvah of lighting the Chanukah candles is from when the sun sets. This is the name of the discourse. This is the book that we're using. Sefer Maimarim. It's published from Kahas. If you'd like to, Kahas Publications, if you'd like to buy a copy. And we're on page 208 in the book, if you have it. Okay, good. So, assuming that you don't have it, I'm going to read a lot inside. The way we introduce this whole idea, which is really going to cut through to the essence of Chanukah. When you light the Chanukah candles this year, I'm going to challenge you to have an entirely different experience. That the lighting of the Chanukah candles should not just be a mere ignition or act of kindling, but it rather should be an act of transformation, of inner transformation and general upliftment. It should be an experience which transforms the darkness of this world gone mad into positivity and hope. Okay? How we're going to do that is what we're going to learn about in this discourse, which is going to take us several sessions. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So let's enjoy every step of the way. The way we introduced this discourse in part one of this discussion was with a couple questions. We said, why is it that the menorah is different to the Shabbos candles? Shabbos candles must be lit before sunset. You're not allowed to light Shabbos candles in the dark because it's already Shabbos and it's a violation of Shabbos. You can't light Shabbos candles. The Rebbe said it's not Friday night candles, it's Friday afternoon candles. It's Erev Shabbos candles. You don't light the candles on Friday night. They burn on Friday night, but you don't light them on Friday night. God forbid, if you miss the cutoff, you don't do it. You're better off not lighting them. So the first question is, why is the Chanukah candles different to the Shabbos candles? Shabbos candles are lit before dark. Chanukah candles are lit after dark. Same thing with the menorah in the temple, which was lit also before dark. The time of the lighting of the menorah lights. Remember, why do we light the Chanukah lights? To remind us of the menorah. The menorah that was lit in the temple that was violated by the Greeks, okay? So the menorah was lit from the Plaga Mincha, which is a 1 1/4 seasonal hours before sunset. It's still broad daylight outside when they lit the menorah in the temple. So why is it that the mitzvah of the Chanukah lights is after dark? We know that there's a general rule. We said that whenever a rabbinical injunction was enacted, it follows the model established by the Torah, which means rabbinical mitzvahs, of which Chanukah candles is one of the 7 rabbinical mitzvahs, it parallels the Torah commandments. So what's going on over here? A warm welcome to Kay Berg from Quebec. Delighted to know you're with us. Amy, pleasure to study with you. And Fran, good morning. Daniel, for God so loved the world, he gave... Oh, forget it. Okay. Okay, back to business of here. So now we're going to start today's session like this. We're going to say the Rebbe is going to introduce us to a game-changing paradigm shift. The first thing you have to realize, and this is where our Chassidus opens our eyes to go behind the scenes, to go backstage, to understand what is happening here when we're lighting the candles after dark. So for us, ordinary human beings, for us mortals, we look at the time of the Chanukah lights and we say, okay, it's day, it's night, it's hot, it's cold. We see the superficial. But Chassidus exposes us to the greater depth that lies beneath. What's going on over here? The concept of sunset, says the Rebbe, refers to exile, which is referred to as darkness. At a time when we cannot see the light of godliness in this world, suddenly we just change the paradigm, because no longer are we lighting the candles at a different time. We're now lighting the candles in a different state of consciousness. Lighting the candles after dark means that these Chanukah candles are somehow associated with exile, with the darkness of exile, with the opposite of the revelation of godliness. Remember, what's the difference between exile and redemption? Every word in Hebrew, the Hebrew name of it expresses, good morning, David, the Hebrew word, I know that, from Jerusalem, shalom, beautiful. The Hebrew word of everything expresses its essence. Remember, we've learned in the doctrine of perpetual creation. How does God continue to create the world at every single moment in time? How does God do this? It's an amazing meditation to reflect upon every day when you might be faced with fearful or anxiety-inducing experiences or stimuli. When you think about the fact that God is creating the world over and over again in every moment, it mitigates your anxiety. How does God do that? For God who creates, recreates every single day, the act of creation. He does so through repeating the words of creation. It was a voice-activated interface. God speaks and the world comes into being. So God constantly has to be speaking like a song, which needs to be playing on repeat in order for the world to continue to be in existence, right? So the words are the DNA of the substance. Letters are the building blocks of creation. Therefore, ergo, the name of something in Hebrew is expressive of its essence. It's DNA, it's code, it's HTML. What's the name? How do you say redemption and how do you say exile and redemption in Hebrew? It's exactly the same word. Gimel Vav Lamed Hey. Gola. G-O-L-A. Gola. Gola means the diaspora. Gola means the exile. You know, when Jews were exiled into the diaspora from the Holy Land. Gola is the exile, right? Galut, same word. So Gola means exile and redemption is Geula. Geula with an aleph. G-E-U-L-A. So Gola is G-O-L-A, is exile, and Geula is G-E-O-L-A. It's just that aleph. There's an extra aleph in there. What does the aleph represent? How does the aleph shift us from exile to redemption? Because aleph is awareness. Aleph represents consciousness of the divine. God is one, right? Aleph is the awareness of one. Aleph is the first letter in the alphabet. It's a number. Every letter is a number. It's the first letter in the alphabet. It's number one. It represents God. It represents Aleph Chabina, which means I will endow you with wisdom. I'll teach you wisdom. Consciousness. Aleph represents consciousness. The only difference between exile and redemption is consciousness. Like Rambam Maimonides says. Maimonides says the only difference between this world and the world of, or the times of Mashiach, of redemption. He says the world will continue as is. The world will function as normal. The only difference is that then the intention of the whole world will be to know God. Quoting Isaiah, and the world will be filled with knowledge of God as the waters cover the ocean bed, the seabed. Right? So the entire difference, the essential difference between exile and redemption is awareness. Now we can understand why exile and redemption is day and night. Because day is when you're aware. I know where the doorknob is when you're in a room, right? You know where the doorknob is, you know where the window is, right? Then you can make your way around. But if you're in a dark room, what happens? You're gonna grope around. You don't know what's going on. You're in the darkness. This is what we're in right now. We're in a state of exile, we're in a state of darkness, a state of confusion. Confusion of what? We don't know right from wrong. Right? We can't tell genocide from self-defense. Right? We can't tell the world cannot tell the difference between Hamas and Hezbollah firing rockets on civilian population centers and Israel trying to retrieve our hostages. No, Israel's the villain and Hamas and Hezbollah are freedom fighters. That's what you hear. This is what we hear, right? I mean, the United Nations actually fired yesterday the Kenyan or Ugandan judge who's in charge of genocide in Israel, because this judge refused to comply with the blood libel that Israel is doing genocide in Gaza. So what did they do? They fired her. She can't toe the line, so they fired her. Right? No, don't. You appointed someone to figure this out. She said it's not a genocide. They say you're not good enough for the job. We'll find someone else. Right? What does this tell you about the world that we're living in? We're living in a Meshuggah Welt, a world of utter confusion, a world of darkness. This is why Chanukah is critical, why Chanukah is crucial for us today, why you must light the Chanukah lights, because the world is now darker than it was last year. The world is darker than ever before. This is the reason why the Chanukah lights are lit in the dark. This is the paradigm shift that the Rebbe gives us at the beginning of this discourse. Sunset. Now we understand what sunset is, right? Furthermore, the cause. Now this is going to be another mind-blowing novelty. The Rebbe is about to say is that the cause of exile. Why are we in such a state of darkness? This is painful. Why are we in such a place of darkness? By our own fault. Why is the world confused about genocide? Why is the world confused about human rights and values? Why are we confused?
That's the answer.
Well, the reason is because we're confused. In case before you brand me a fanatic, before you accuse me of victim blaming, which is what this sounds like, we say this every day, every Shabbos in the Musaf Amidah. And because of our sins, we were exiled from our land. So it says. This is an amazing theme that comes up where the focus here is not to blame the victim as much as it is to empower the victim. Because the moment that we realize that we actually are in the driver's seat, we're moved away from being victims. We're no longer victims. You could easily blame, you could say, look, when you blame the Jew for anti-Semitism, it's what effectively we're saying here, right? We're blaming the Jew for anti-Semitism because your spirituality is not in the right place. It's a big statement. That's a big thing to say, right? That it's the Jew's fault that he's not spiritually aware, and that's why God is sending him a message. God is sending him a wake-up call. Listen, God gave you 3 cars. How many golf memberships you have? 2, right? Okay, you belong to 2 golf memberships. How many houses you have? 2, sometimes 3, okay. Your investments are doing amazing, right? Life is good. And where's your spirituality? Nowhere to be found. Oh, well, God's got to get your attention somehow. God's got to find your attention somehow. So what's he going to do? If nothing else works, he's going to have to give you a wake-up call. And sometimes you get a ton of bricks land in your head. And you'll be like, God, why'd you do that to me? And he says, oh, finally I got your attention. What are you going to do about it? So what happens the moment that Chassidus, this is unique to Chassidus, this idea, even though Chassidus explains it, but it comes from a liturgy, this idea that the exile is caused by our own sins, right? What happens is that we cease to be a victim. We're no longer subject to the control of someone else. We actually are the masters of our own destiny. Because if I got myself into this trouble, that means I can get out of it. And that's actually why it's an empowering message instead of a depressing one. Let's take a look at this idea in the words of the Rebbe. Furthermore, the cause of the physical exile, both the fact that we are in exile and the fact that we don't see godliness within the physical world, which is the awareness that will happen when we come to Mashiach. What's the cause of this exile? Is the spiritual darkness created by transgressing God's will. This is a meditation. You can spend a day meditating on this idea that we are in exile because of our own sins. This spiritual darkness is the opposite of Torah and mitzvahs. The antithesis of exile is awareness, right? What brings about awareness? Torah and mitzvahs. When you learn Torah, you're opening your mind and heart to become conscious of God. When you do a mitzvah, what does a mitzvah mean? The word mitzvah translates superficially as commandment, but on a deeper level, essentially, the word mitzvah means a hug. It means an embrace. It means intimacy. It means a connection. Whenever you do a mitzvah, you are connecting with God Almighty. And that's why when you do a mitzvah, you make a blessing, you make an affirmation. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. What does the word Baruch mean? Baruch means welcome. The word Baruch means welcome. Baruch means to draw. It's based on the Mishnah, which speaks about grafting trees. And when you want to extend a branch, I'm no farmer, but from what I understand, you can graft and you can extend the branch. It's called hamavrich. When you extend, it's like extending an invitation. When you're inviting someone in, that's the word baruch. I invite you. Who? Ata. First, second person. You. Who's you? Havaya, infinity, master of the universe. Elokeinu, my personal God. Matt, to become the king of the whole world. Every time you do a mitzvah, you make that affirmation. You're saying, God Almighty, come on in. I'm waiting for you in this place and in this space and in this time and in this problem. I'm welcoming you, God, right here down into my world, into my space. This is what happens every time we do a mitzvah. When we study Torah, we do mitzvahs. We're the antithesis of exile. So this spiritual darkness, the suffering of exile, it's the opposite of Torah and mitzvahs, because the verse states a mitzvah is a candle and the Torah is light. Remember, darkness is exile, but a mitzvah, the verse says, is a candle and the Torah is light. This is why we say in the Musaf prayer of Yom Tov. I'm sorry, did I say the Musaf prayer of Shabbos before? It's the Musaf prayer of Yom Tov. Forgive me, and Rosh Chodesh also. As a consequence of our sins, which caused the spiritual darkness, we were exiled into the physical darkness of the exile. And this is the idea that we have to meditate upon today, friends. When we think about the Chanukah mitzvah, and we think about the fact how the sages instituted this rabbinical mitzvah as a mitzvah which takes place in the time of darkness. It's not just some weird synthesis that somebody forgot to watch the editing. It's not that they made a mistake. No. This is very, very deliberate. Because remember, Chanukah is the very last of the Jewish holidays. The last of the biblical Jewish holidays in sequence. Think about it. Pesach was 3,300 years ago, right? Shavuos was also 3,300 years ago. Sukkot was also 3,300 years ago. Purim was only 2,200 years ago, relatively recent. But Chanukah was after Purim, was about several decades. It was a couple hundred years, actually, after Purim. So Purim maybe was 2,400 years ago. Chanukah would have been 2,200 years ago. But it's the last Jewish holiday in sequence, which means the Chanukah story happened when we were already in the Roman exile. Think about it this way. We come out of Egypt, 500 years of judges. King David, King Solomon build the first temple.
Greek.
What was the Greek?
Chanukah.
Yeah.
What did I say?
You said Roman.
No.
You'll see, I'm getting to the Roman exile right now. You'll see why it's the Roman exile. Because the Egyptians built the first, we came out of Egypt. King David and Solomon build the first temple, which is subsequently destroyed by the Babylonians, right? We go to Babylon, on the rivers of Babylon, right? We're there we're in Babylon for about 30 years. We're in Babylon for about 30 years before the Persians conquer the Babylonians, the Iranians. So Iran conquers Iraq. Persia conquers Babylon, right? That's the end of Iraq. And now sees the rise of Persia, more of Achashverosh, Haman, and Esther, right? So eventually, after the Purim story, which takes place in Persia, Iran, they come back to Israel. Under Iranian funding and protection, they rebuild the second temple. And now we're in the second temple. Fantastic. During that time of the second temple, the Greeks could have destroyed that temple. They didn't. They chose to defile it, as we'll learn in this discourse. So they defiled that temple. And that's when the Chanukah story takes place, during the time of the existence of the second temple. Later on, the Romans destroyed that second temple. We're now in the exile of Rome. But the Romans conquered all the nations around them, right? They just beat everybody up. We're still in the Roman exile. When the Romans conquered the Greeks, what happened? Who ruled over who? Physically, the Romans ruled over the Greeks. But the Greeks were more wise men. Socrates, Plato, Eureka, what's his name again? All those guys, right? All the philosophers of Greece. What actually happened was that the Greeks actually conquered Rome ideologically, right? The whole ideology of Greece is what infiltrated into the kingdom of Rome, which we're still suffering from today. So in other words, I always say that we never actually won the Chanukah story. We drove the Greeks out of Israel. We reached a ceasefire. but we did not finish the deal. There was not total surrender, which is why the Greeks still today bother us. Today, we're still struggling with what we struggled back then in the Chanukah story. Like then, we struggled with assimilation, with assimilating into their culture. That's what the Greeks wanted from us. This one was not a war against Jews. The Greeks' war against us was against Judaism. They were trying to make us assimilated, right? And that's what we're still struggling with today, which is why I say that today's exile, which is the exile of Rome, is also the exile of Greece, where we're still struggling with this exact war. So the war of Chanukah is happening, is being waged in the present tense. So now we can understand why it is that the Chanukah lights are lit in the darkness, because we're still in the darkness. You know, we did an October 7th memorial, a memorial event on October 7th. And what we did is we did it on national television. We were raising money for the IDF to make them successful, to give them drones, etc. Somebody criticized me afterwards and says that wasn't a memorial. Wasn't a memorial. Why? Because there's no Kaddish. There was no Yizkar, right? And I said, I'm really sorry to disappoint you. But the reason that we didn't do a memorial is because the war is still ongoing. There's nothing to do a memorial for. You first need to win the war before you can start worrying about how you're going to remember the war. But in the middle of the war, it's not appropriate to remember the fallen, right? We're in the middle of the Holocaust, right? If you're in the middle of the Holocaust, you don't make an event remembering the Holocaust. You make an event focusing on how to end the Holocaust. That's what you do. That's what we did. And that's what's happening here in Chanukah. We're not remembering a victory like we do on Pesach or on Purim, when we remember how we defeated the Persians, how we defeated the Egyptians. Here, this war is still happening. It's the last Jewish holiday, which is currently in process, which is why we need to light the candles after dark. Because the candles, lighting the candles at that time represents the exile that we're currently in. And the more we descend into exile, the more darker it becomes. I mean, it's a little hard to imagine they could get even darker than it is right now. It's harder to imagine they get darker than it was in the Middle Ages and the Crusades and all the suffering that we suffered in the middle, in the past 2,000 years. But things are pretty bad. Things are pretty bad these days, and that's the reason why we light the Chanukah candles, because we're empowering ourselves, realizing that we're not a victim. When we light those candles, and why it's so important to get as many Jews as possible to light the candles of Chanukah, is because the moment we light those candles, and the moment your neighbor that doesn't even know that he's Jewish lights the Chanukah candles, they are bringing consciousness and holiness to their space. A friend of mine sent me a video this morning of he's a Chabad rabbi in Mexico, in Cozumel, and he met the head of a Mayan tribe somewhere in the Amazon. They live out there in the jungle, and he met the head of that Mayan tribe, and he got into conversation, and the guy tells him, "Yeah, I'm not Jewish, but my wife is Jewish. Her name is Dana Silverberg from New Jersey. She's the wife of the head of the Mayan tribe." So the Chabad rabbi is like, "Let me meet her." No, she's not Jewish anymore. She's not. But what about your kids? They have 10, 13, and 17-year-old boys. We've got to meet them. We've got to do a bar mitzvah. So the mother said, no, we're not interested. Let's ask the boys, said the rabbi. And they asked the boys, and they explained to them what a bar mitzvah is. They said, yeah, we want it. So I watched the video this morning of the mother who still remembered how to read Hebrew from New Jersey. And she's reading the Shema to her boys while they're wearing the tefillin, right? So what's going on here? In the middle of the jungle, you got these 3 boys that are Jewish and their mother. And they're doing a mitzvah. They're illuminating the darkness of the jungle. That's what's happening over here. They're living in the dense thicket, right, of the Amazon rainforest. And here they're lighting up the night. This is what's happening every single time that we are lighting the Chanukah lights. And we just finished this point. The reason why the Chanukah lights are lit after sunset is that they can illuminate the darkness of the exile. Parenthetically, the Rebbe points out that in addition to illuminating the darkness of the exile after the destruction of the temple, it also illuminated the darkness of the exile at the time of the miracle of Chanukah, even though it was during the time of the second temple. The temple wasn't destroyed, remember, by the Greeks, right? That era was also referred to as exile, the Greek exile. Do you remember most of the Jews assimilated during the Chanukah story? The Maccabees represented only a small remaining minority of the Jewish people that remained loyal to their faith. That era was also referred to as exile, even though the temple was still there. The Greek exile, due to the effect that the Greeks were having on the Jewish people then, particularly just before the miracle of Chanukah, when the darkness and suffering increased, as we mentioned in the prayer of Allah Nisim, which is added during Chanukah. There's that paragraph that we add during Chanukah. I'll just read it to you quickly. It's in the Silent Amidah. And we thank you for the miracles, for the redemption, for the mighty deeds, for the saving acts, and for the wonders which you have wrought for our ancestors in those days at this time. Now, what I'm about to read is what's happening during the time that the second temple existed. Right? It was still up for a while until the Romans destroyed it later, a couple hundred years later. I'm sorry, Hanan, I'm speaking too fast. Apologies. Hi, Hannah. Okay. In the days of Matisyahu, the son of Yochanan, the high priest, the Hasmonean and his sons, when the wicked Hellenic government, that's the Greeks, rose up against your people Israel to make them forget your Torah and violate the decrees of your will. Remember, they were not trying to take us away from Torah, just they were taking us away from your Torah. Right? They were not trying to take us away from mitzvahs. They were only trying to make us violate the decrees, the irrational decrees of your will. But the logical mitzvahs, they said, you can keep those, right? Because remember, the Greeks wanted to rationalize Judaism. They said, we like your culture. Just don't give me any faith. Don't do anything which doesn't make sense. The Greeks were philosophers, remember.
They're okay with cultural.
They didn't believed in cultural Judaism. They didn't believe in spiritual, irrational Judaism. They hated the decrees. They loved the rational mitzvahs, like honoring your parents and giving charity and stuff like that, right? They also didn't want us to do the Torah because it's God's Torah. They said, do the Torah because it's nice wisdom, right? But you and your abounding mercy stood by them in the time of their distress. You waged their battles, defended their rights, and avenged the wrong done to them. You delivered the mighty into the hands of the weak. Our sages explain that this is referring not to the Jews overwhelming the Gentiles. This refers to the Maccabees overwhelming the assimilated Jews. That you deliver the mighty into the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few, because most Jews were assimilated, the impure into the hands of the pure. Gentiles don't become impure. Only Jews become impure. There's nothing wrong with walking into a Gentile cemetery, but walking into a Jewish cemetery, you'll become impure. Right? So when it says the impure into the hands of the pure, it's talking about the Jews who fell off the wagon, which was the majority, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, and the wanton sinners into the hands of those who occupy themselves with the Torah. We were absolutely outnumbered. There was very little prospects for continuity of Judaism. By the way, whenever the Romans conquered someone, there was no remnant of this nation. You know, when they conquered the Byzantines or the Vikings or something, there was nothing left of these guys. Except for the Greeks, whose culture dominated Rome, and the Jews, who somehow, even the Greeks as a people have disappeared, but the Greeks as a culture, as a philosophy, has become Rome. But the Jews as a people have endured, right? That's a miracle. You made a great and holy name for yourself in your world and effected a great deliverance and redemption for your people Israel to this very day. Then your children entered the shrine of your house, cleansed your temple, purified your sanctuary, kindled lights in your holy courtyards, and instituted these 8 days of Chanukah to give thanks and praise to your great name. And this, my friends, is what I'm going to finish it off today by saying that the Chanukah story needs to be reinterpreted on a whole new level. I know you might have done Chanukah 50 times in your life already, 50 years in a row or not, or more or less. But it's time to take it to the next level. Chanukah is so much more a story of our current reality than it is a story of the ancient past. Chanukah is something which allows us, gives us the tools to be able to overcome the darkness in this world around us, as opposed to merely sentimental remembrance of something that happened in the ancient past. And the way that we're starting to do this is an empowering idea that we learned today. That idea is that the darkness of exile is caused by our own sins, by our own straying from Torah and mitzvahs. When we stray from Torah and mitzvahs, when we mitigate our observance and our responsibility, it's then that God turns his back on us. We turn our back on God, and then God hides from us. If we hide from God, then God hides from us. And when God hides, what happens? You're descending into a state of darkness, because God is light. Eitz chaim hi lamachazikim ba. She is a tree of life to those who grasp hold of the Torah. That's what it says. God is life. I'm begging you, says God in the Torah, you've got a choice of life and death, and I'm begging you to choose life, but yet many of us make the wrong choice. And what happens then is you're choosing darkness, you're choosing death. Right? You turn your back on God, God turns his back on you. If you want to turn the lights on, then you got to turn back to God. So this is a very empowering message that we're starting to learn in our series over here, which is the series of Chanukah. Just to those that are passionately commenting here about somehow the light being a human being who became God, that is a violation of the 10 Commandments. So to believe that a human being is a God, or to pray to a human being, is a violation of the first commandment and a violation of the second commandment. So that's why it's not consistent with Jewish values. Now, for Christians to believe that, I'm not a Christian scholar, but for Jews to believe that would be an absolute violation of the first 2 of the 10 Commandments, and therefore not anything. God became man. That's exactly my point. It would be considered idolatry for Jews. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we don't do that. So we're very clear as Jews. We've always remembered, as much as we embrace and welcome our Christian friends, it's not a faith for us to be able to incorporate, because it does run contrary to our values. Okay? We'll carry this on, God willing, next week. Thank you very much.
So